AI mania hit a bit of a detour this week. All over the 3 or 4 days, AI stocks were down across the board because of this MIT study that went viral, as well as Sam Altman's comments about a bubble and Zuck instituting a hiring freeze in AI after going on a complete blitzkrieg. So let's get into it. Act 1, Monday, Fortune dug up a generative AI study that MIT published last month, I should say. In that study, MIT found that 95% of Gen AI pilots are failing to make it to production because of employee resistance, poor quality output, and the most interesting problem seems to be resource misallocation. According to the study, 70% of Gen AI budgets are going towards things like building sales and marketing tools, which have poor ROI. The highest ROI was found in back office optimization, like automating tasks that cut back spends, on various departments. Basically, these pilots aren't working, Chamath, is what the study found. They evaluated 300 AI implementations and interviewed 150 leaders across 52 companies. You've been grinding it out with your own software company now called 8090. Does this align with what you're seeing on the field, Chamath?
I think what I would tell you is that I think the first wave was just a lot of boards who read the words AI somewhere in an article and then went to a board meeting and turned to the CEO and said, "What's your AI strategy?" Mm-hmm. And then the CEO turns around and sends that down into their org, and it eventually hits the CTO's desk. And I think the first wave is mostly people just spending money because they had large existing budgets. And so they were like, let's just go and try a bunch of different things. And I think now we're going through the sorting function of realizing that there's a big difference between probabilistic software and deterministic software. That's probably the biggest reason why you're seeing so many failure modes in sales and marketing. It's very hard to codify sales and marketing into a set of heuristics that never change. But back office processes, why they're so good and a great target for AI is ultimately you have so many people that have been hired to deal with edge cases, right? I think that's what people do in most companies is they're in charge of a process and they're dealing with edge cases. And I think that you can get extremely high rates of accuracy if you implement AI correctly in back office tasks. I think the real question is what happens to all of this revenue that has been generated? You're seeing companies generating $50, $100 million of ARR in a matter of months and then raising huge rounds. I think what we haven't seen is whether there'll be any sort of either logo churn or dollar churn as new companies come in with even cheaper solutions. The foundational models move up the stack and just absorb capability, or things just don't work and they get abandoned. All of that churn happened in social. I remember when I was in the middle of helping build Facebook, we went through that whole cycle. There was 7,000 or 8,000 social companies. Yep. And within 6 years, there was 5 of us left. It happened in SaaS when I was investing in SaaS. There's a couple of very early and important successes like Yammer, which Saks started, which I was very lucky to be an investor of. But then it took many years for the handful of winners to get really sorted out. And I suspect we're about to go through that same cycle in AI. So I think that article basically paints a very accurate picture. There's been a lot of trialing and experimentation. We now need to go through a sorting and a cleansing, and then we'll rebuild from first principles around the
not surprising
the
to
businesses that are good.
Not surprising to our sultan of SaaS, David Sachs, because the sales and marketing departments, they're very promiscuous when it comes to new tools, getting a great lead, closing a sale, you can directly connect it. So we always see them test stuff out. Doesn't surprise me that we'd see sales and marketing go after this first. But what do you think about the brittleness of this revenue, the churn, Sachs? Are we going to see a lot of these companies rocket up to 100 and come back down to 50? Is this something you're seeing, or your firm, which I don't know your status at the firm, maybe you could tell us how that's working out in terms of your intelligence there. But what is Kraft seeing on the field there?
I think we're seeing a lot of interesting AI applications being developed, but it's still very early days. And I think that over the past week or so, there was a correction in sentiment towards AI, but I think it was a healthy correction. I don't think this was the beginning of a bust cycle or something like that. I still think that we're in a boom. I still think we're in a investment super cycle, but I think there was a healthy dose of skepticism applied to some of the more fantastical claims that have been made about AI. And I think this is why you saw there's like roughly like a 10% correction in public AI stocks. And there was that MIT report that said that 95% of projects at companies are not making it to production yet, and so forth and so on. So I feel like we're getting in the weeds a little bit here, and what we should be talking about is just sort of where we are in this AI super cycle.
And where do you perceive us at? We're in the experimentation phase, we're in the pilot phase, but this issue around probabilistic versus deterministic makes it hard to trust this software. Is that what you think the key issue is?
Well, let me tell you why I think that this correction is actually healthy, is that after ChatGPT launched at the end of 2022 and then throughout 2023, the dominant narrative in AI is that AGI was just 2 to 3 years away. And everyone kind of had their own definition of AGI was, but it was kind of this idea of smarter than human superintelligence and kind of magic AI. AI would be able to do everything. And as a result of that, you kind of had both utopian and dystopian narratives really proliferated. And so, you started getting this like job loss narrative that within a few years, 50% of knowledge workers would be out of jobs. You got this rapid takeoff narrative that basically the leading AI models would be able to turn their intelligence towards improving themselves, towards recursive self-improvement. And therefore, within a couple of years, the leading models would basically achieve superintelligence and leave everyone else in the dust and then capture all the value of humanity. And then based on that narrative, which again, it was the same underlying narrative that fueled both utopian and dystopian or doomer takes on AI. You got, I think, a huge backlash, which has already been forming, where you have 1,000 bills running through state legislatures right now, and you have all this AI safety legislation. You got bills like in California, the SB 1047, which would have applied a tremendous amount of new regulation to AI. So you saw this policy backlash happen as well. And it was all based on these fantastical and kind of magic views of what AI was going to do in just the next 2 to 3 years. And I think that the reason why this recent skepticism is healthy is because I think it's rebutting all of that. And it's showing that, AI is a powerful tool. I mean, I definitely think it's a new and important form of computing, and it is going to unlock tremendous value in the economy, but it's going to take us a while to get there. I mean, you can't just tell the AI, be a sales rep, be a customer service rep, and kind of throw it over the wall and expect that it's going to replace a human. It takes a lot of prompting and iteration and validation to make the AI work, to make it generate business value. And if we were on a path towards rapid takeoff, then what you would see is that the leading AI models would be increasing the distance between, like the top 1 or 2 models would be increasing the distance between, the rest of the models. And instead, what we're seeing is a clustering of model performance around the same performance benchmarks. It's
incremental, right? They're incrementally
The progress
getting
needs to
better.
be a little bit more incremental. It's more evolutionary rather than revolutionary. And I think this really crystallized around the launch of ChatGPT 5, where a lot of people were expecting GPT-5 to be this huge breakthrough. Sam Altman was sort of teasing this concept by posting photos of the Death Star. That the idea that this model was going to blow everybody else away. And the reviews ended up being very mixed. And then we saw that on the performance evaluations. It's not that the model didn't represent progress. It just fell short of these lofty expectations that have been created.
So Freeberg, let me get you in on this.
Sorry, I've been kind of long-winded here, but let me sum this up, which is,
please.
I think that what people can now see is that we're not in like a loop of recursive self-improvement. We're seeing that there are a handful of great model companies, but the development of this technology is going to be a more normal technology race. It's not like the leading players just all of a sudden achieve AGI just very quickly. And as a result of that, I think because it is a more normal technology race, I think we can apply a more normal logic to it from both an investment and a policy standpoint. And I think that a lot of the narratives that were hyped up about imminent doom or imminent utopia, depending on what side you were on, were just massively overhyped. And this is why I think it's just a very healthy thing.